Hi, I hope you're having a beautiful day. It's certainly nice weather here. Um, I used to like evangelize in Amsterdam, a long time ago, and I had a lot of good talks with a lot of people, very interesting. But I asked God, like, why is it? Why there's so many people? Are there? Why isn't not everybody in church? How? What's keeping them from going to church? And one of the first things that God showed me it was there's this roadblock. There's this road towards church, this road towards God is like filled with all these obstacles. And if we get rid of the obstacles, then people will be able to go to church to find God. And so that's something I started to think about, like what kind of obstacles are there. And then one day, some time later, God showed me something, and it's called dirtying the brand. And it means that, let's say you have a brand, and you have this idea that it's something, you get like all this information about it, and you just, or something happens, and you're really upset. Like, let me explain. Like, let's say you have a Starbucks, right? And the Starbucks, one day you go there, and the price is just like boom, $6, and the taste is it just doesn't taste the same. Just tastes watered down, decaf, and you start to think, well, what's going on? And then like a week later, again you go to this Starbucks, and again, boom, there's another $2 on top of the price, like $8 now, and it's like completely watered down. No, only have decaf. There's nothing really there. I mean, how would you go to another Starbucks and try another one? And even if you go to another city, another location, another Starbucks, you wouldn't just go in because your experience with this brand now is dirty. It's no longer good. It might still look the same and everything, but yeah, you're not going to even try if this Starbucks is going to have like a good cup of coffee, or it's going to be normal price. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. And the two main things that can either make or break a church. I think what can make a church is faith, and what can break a church is religion. And religion is like a price. If the price is too high, if you're going to a church and you get all these religious ideas thrown on top of you that you have to adhere to this and this and this, and it's like this big stumbling block. It's so hard to get into heaven because there are all these problems. You need to fix all these problems. That's the price, and all these rules you have to live by. And then you have, and that will also work onto the faith, because people that are bogged down with this high price, with all these rules and all these ideas that it's all about being perfect, this perfect person, they it's going to be hard to have faith, because they're going to have a lot of disappointment in themselves and everything. And faith is actually the thing that is like the taste, just like the power, the caffeine. If people have faith, they see miracles happening in their life, and that will like give them a great experience with church life. The walk with God will be great. So I think that can happen to a church where a lot of religion comes in, and they're only teaching religion. They're not teaching faith, and a good church like this will shrink. On the other hand, if there's a church that will teach faith, and that has a lot of faith, and faith is growing, then people will start to talk to each other. Look, this happened. God did this in my life. God did that in my life. If you look at, um, there's this part in the Bible where Jesus talks to a woman to a well, and she has lost all her husbands, and she's not married, and she just, and he knows, and he tells her that, and she's so amazed that he has this knowledge. She goes back to her village and she starts saying it to everybody, and everybody's amazed. Wow, this man is, how can he know these things? And they know that there's something special going on there. And even a word of knowledge can do that. So yeah, I think that's really something we should focus on. But there are also a lot of people, they are focused on fixing things. You know, when I was a believer like 20 years ago, I was also, before I was a believer, I was a smoker. And I really hated it because I felt, yeah, I thought it was a waste of money, it wasn't healthy, and I regretted ever starting it. And yeah, so for 10 years I smoked, and I really hated it. But when I became a believer, I thought with God's help it's easy to stop. And then it was easy. And I think if things like this happen in your life, where your problems get fixed with the help of God, then it will build your faith and it will be a great experience. But let's say if religion kicks in and you feel bogged down, and maybe for some reason you have all this, you have a problem with being a smoker and everything, it could be a very uncomfortable situation. And that's kind of what I want to talk about with the price and yeah, the power. So if the power is too low and the price is too high, then yeah, you won't have people enjoying their time. And this is really the main thing for like a Starbucks or any business or any place that depends on people voluntarily going there and enjoying it and making use of the service, that people are having a great time. So my vision has always been, when I was like preaching in Amsterdam and everything, my vision was where I asked God, like, why is it so hard? There's so many people in Amsterdam. Why are there so few people going to church? Because my idea was, I want to have everybody enjoy what I enjoy, you know, and everybody have the same thing. I want to share it with everybody. And my question was, well, how can I do that, and why does it seem to be so hard? But if you think about everybody, certainly a city as Amsterdam, there are a lot of different people in Amsterdam, a lot of people, different people everywhere. And I think that if we look at the religion, the prices, I mean, smoking might not seem so bad, but there are a lot of people that just go partying in the weekends. How do you deal with that, you know? And it only gets worse and worse in Amsterdam. There's a lot of stuff going on. I used to preach there on the street, so, you know, yeah, I counted a lot of stuff there. How do you deal with that, you know? And I think it's no different than my cigarette smoking. In the end, God can deal with it. It doesn't really matter if God's healing somebody who's sick or like an addiction. What kind of addiction it is really not very important. But it is important how we deal with it, you know. And that's where we have to be wary of, are we dealing in it with faith, or are we dealing in it with religion? And if we're dealing in religion, we're just putting a really high price and with very, very little nice taste. So you're making a product that's very unattractive to people. Well, if you approach it with faith and you leave religion out of it, then people will be amazed and you see God work and will be very happy, and they will share it with the people around them, attracting more people. So there are a few things, a few topics that are kind of like fringe. They're really on the edge of Christianity. I've been thinking about those things because I know my church is pretty much really, um, it's not a very religious church. So it wouldn't be hard to convince anybody there of the things I'm saying. But if I look from the outside in, from people who they're looking at church, they are asking questions. What about why do you treat homosexuals so bad? And that's like dirtying the brand. If they see us treating certain groups of people bad, it reflects bad on us. So the question for me is, how should we treat the people? Can we treat those people better? And should we? And how can we? So I looked at scripture and I found a scripture, and it's called, it's about Jesus. Like this adulterous woman is thrown in front of him, and this group of people are ready to like stone her, because that was in those days the law. The law was to stone an adulterous person. And then he said, well, anybody who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. So what happened is that all the people thought about this, and then one by one they all left until he was left over. And he said, well, I'm not gonna stone you either. I'm not gonna judge you either. And go and don't do it anymore. Now if you look in the Bible, in that area where they talk about stoning, they talk about abortion. That if like a man fight in the street and accidentally there's an abortion, whatever happened to the child or to the pregnancy, that should happen to them. So if the child dies, you know, if the child gets born with problems, with like missing a leg or something, you know, then you have to take the leg of the guy who did it. And it's really an eye for an eye kind of idea that they had in those days. And we as Christians, of course, don't do that anymore. And the same, and there's also a scripture there about homosexuals, where they say, well, stone them, the same as like for adultery. So I think that if you look at those parts of the Bible where those rules are written, what would have Jesus said if any of those things would have happened? He would have probably, of course, said the same thing, like, who is without sin cast the first stone, you know? And you could say, well, it's a different sin, and but the same thing still applies. Who without sin cast the first stone? So you can say, well, whatever sin somebody has, only if you're without sin you can judge that person. And since only Jesus is that person, you have to leave it up to him. So I think that if you like follow through on this kind of thinking, yeah, you have to give those kind of people a lot more slack. And what and I know that the church doors might be open for anybody, but how we treat the people once they are in can sometimes be a bit of a problem. And that's what I'm talking about. People looking at church, they see that when a homosexual comes into our church, we just do anything to try and change that person. And I understand, like, if you look from Old Testament and stuff, I can understand that you're trying to do that. I'm not saying I cannot change the Old Testament, cannot change the rule, what is good or bad. I'm not saying that it's good, you know, adultery is not good, abortion is not good. So homosexuality, I cannot just say, okay, it's fine now. But we can say, well, we're not gonna cast a stone. And when somebody, so that means that if somebody from the LGBTQ community comes into your church, maybe you should think about how do you treat those people. Are you gonna like, if somebody wants to be in a church for 20, 30 years or even 1 year, are you gonna allow them to do that? Or are you gonna nag them and just try to force something on them that they might not be ready for, and that might never happen. You know, um, is there space for people that have, uh, yeah, that have, you know, um, like I don't know if somebody says that this is the only way that they can live. Who am I to like try to like force them into another lifestyle? You know, um, I can go back and say, well, in the Old Testament this and that, but there are a lot of things in the Old Testament. Old Testament, you have to be circumcised. I'm not circumcised. I'm not asking anybody to get circumcised when they become a Christian, but it's still Old Testament rule. This was the covenant with Abraham. And I can go on. I can about food, kosher food, and washing of hands, and there's all these rules. There's so many rules. And even like Paul, when he went out into the world to preach Christianity, I mean, there was this big carpet with all these foods, and God said, well, you can now eat all these foods. And there were like all kinds of stuff that he would never be able to eat normally as a Jew. So, am I saying that it's fine, or that it's no longer a rule or something? I'm not the person to say that, you know. But the problem is, if we don't handle this in a better way, you will keep people out. Not only the people that are actually hurt by this, but all the other people that expect us to be better, expect us to be more loving, and we should be loving. This is our whole thing, you know. So is it loving just to expect somebody to change something that they don't feel they should change or can change? So that's one point. And this is so this is the fringe of like religion. I think that we can talk about all the other stuff in between smoking and that, but I think that we covered now like everything in between too, I guess. There's something else though, and this is something that also is keeping a lot of people out of church, like the general population, and that is, I think that times has changed a lot. I mean, we're like in 2020 now. The Bible was written for, New Testament was about 2,000 years ago, and then the whole Bible was written before that. And translations, the Bibles that we have now, they're also pretty old. Some are newer. There's some newer Bibles. But the problem that people have is that they go to school, they watch the television, and they study science. And what they see in science and what they see like reading like Genesis, it doesn't match up in their ideas. And now somebody like me, it might say, well, there must be a reason for this. And for me, like science, as far as all the things that they research, and that has been double researched and triple and 100 times researched by so many people. Why would I doubt that if this is what they say? I know sometimes they make little mistakes, but I don't think that they're wrong about the universe being like 13.8 billion years old. I don't think that, they might be off by like 30 million years or something, but it's not going to be much more probably. And if they do, well, it's still going to be billions of years. It's not going to be like 10,000 years. And that's a bit of a problem, because in the Bible, if you look at what it says about like the whole first creation, the first part was done in one day, and that's about 9 billion years that they have to try and fit in one day. And then you have all the other, like another 4 million years that is like done in like a few days. So how can we, like, for me it was not a problem because I already experienced God. I believe in God, so I know that if the Bible says He created us, and He created us, and if science says, well, it's done in this time and this way, evolution and all the scientific things they talk about, actually for a large part in my eyes it matches up, except for like the day part. But if you look at the whole, like even evolution, if you look like where it says like, well, first you had this and first you had that, evolution also, you had different, first you had fish in the sea, because you need fish in the sea before you have land animals. Although, that's kind of how it happens. So, and there's all these steps. First you need vegetable oil, you need you need plants and trees before you have actual other life. So you need something that creates oxygen before you can have somebody that uses oxygen to create CO2. And those have been like working together for like 4 billion years. So I started to think, well, what is how can this be? How there must be something going on there, something that I know they're both true. I know the Bible's true. I know that science is true, for the most part. So what is going on here? And then one day I kind of was like thinking, and I was thought, well, what if it's like dawn? What if the translation, the original translation, is not really like day, but it's more something like dawn? And then it made more sense, even in like the context of the way it is spoken. Like, what if say, like, well, this is the dawn of the first era, or this is the dawn of the second era. Then in an era you can talk about billions of years, right? So the Ice Age was millions of years. Precambrian was millions of years. So, and that's kind of how we talk about in science too. We divide it in eras, because we can say, well, in between this period and this period, this happened. Before 4 billion years ago, there was no real planet, so there couldn't be anything happening on this planet. So that whole area we put in one area, because for us, until the Earth is here, it's not very interesting. Well, that is it, but this is interesting. But for us, the main thing is everything that happens since Earth began. And then we start putting those in more eras, ages. So I thought about that, and then I thought, well, what if it's something like dawn or something? What if the translation is a bit different, and we could interpret it differently? And and that actually was true. I looked up the word yom. Yom is the word that is used in the original text, and yom can be translated. If you look on Wikipedia, it can be translated in different ways, a lot of different ways. They all are some form of time periods. It can be a day. It could be a very long time period, like an era, and you have all these time periods. So how we interpreted this word is really depending on what we are talking about. And what they did is they looked at what was written, and because it said 1 and 2 and 3, and then later on, also when there's 1 and 2, it's like 1 day or 2 days, 3 days walking, So because in other areas, it usually talked about travel or short periods of a couple of days. They thought, well, then we have to assume that because this also has numbers, it's also talking about days. But that's just focusing on the fact that there are numbers. It's not focusing on the fact that we're talking about creation of the universe. We're talking about let there be light. We're talking about creation of the forming of the whole globe. It says like if Earth was formless and void. So you want to say that the Earth goes from formless and void to being compact in 24 hours. That's insane. But if you think in a God as some kind of magician that just like in the Avengers movie, Thanos, he has all the Infinity Stones and he just snaps his finger and he can do all these amazing things. You're talking about some absolute power which God has. But the question is, did he actually do it in that way? Now, of course, he could have. I'm not doubting that. The question is, what kind of evidence is there if he did it that way, or if he did it in like in the era way where things took billions of years? I mean, it says the Earth was formless and void, and so how did he do that? Was it 24 hours? Now, if you look at all the geological things, etc., you always see that it takes a lot of, like even a pebble, like you see round pebbles. Now, a pebble is not round because God created them round. They are round because over long periods of time, those pebbles, they were formed by either wind, but mostly by water. By water, like they were like swept away in water, and they started out as like at this big rocks that were like with hard edges, and they were like the water just erase those edges and become small pebbles, and that takes time. And in geology, they can look at so many things in how like the Earth was formed, and many of those things take lots and lots of time, and you have all these like layers and sediments, and you can see that actually if you study those sediments, that there's enormous time periods that have gone. Look at diamonds. I mean, diamonds are made from carbon, right? And carbon is actually it's usually from some something biological, like a tree, or from some animals, and that had to go all the way underneath the layers, and then all these layers on top of them, they had to put pressure on it for the diamonds to form. And these are things that don't happen in a few thousand years, or a few days, a few thousand years. And let's look at like all the metals. We have gold and silver and iron. We have all these metals that are even part of us in our bodies, and they were formed in supernova. And supernova are stars that reach the point where they become super hot, and they're like 10,000 times stronger than any other like star. And they just and at these levels, these molecules are formed. And the fact that we have all these metals on this planet, even in our body, is because they come from supernova. So this is a process of a star forming, all these materials forming the star then burning up for billions of years, and then finally becoming a supernova, and then these metals forming, and then those metals traveling through the universe, ending up in our planet Earth, where they become part of us. This is not a 10,000 year situation, There are no suns that live for 10,000 years. They live like billions of years. And so the question is, like, if you look at all this scientific information, then you have to look back at the Bible and you say, well, then what are we going to talk about? Are we going to still talk about short periods or long periods? What is the right definition of Yom if you look at science and all the things that happen in the planet? How is the creation actually done? Now, there's only one answer, and that is it must have been longer time periods. And if you want to reach everybody, you have to take that in consideration, serious consideration, because if you don't, are you going to make sense to those people? You're going to expect them to be, some people know these things, they know science. There's no way you can bring them on any other ideas, because the only thing you could tell them is that that God made it look like. I mean, then you're talking about God being, we can see the facts in nature. You know, there's nothing to go around there. The only reason to keep talking about something happening in 6 days is because people think, well, if we allow people to think that something is wrong in the Bible, then the Bible is false. And if the Bible is false, then God doesn't exist. Well, for me, that's crazy talk, because I know God exists, and God is not dependent on how we print our Bibles, you know. So I think we should really start thinking about this, what the real meaning is of Genesis, and how we portray this to other people. Because how can you be, because if you don't, it's just going to be religion. It's going to be religion holding back people from reaching God. If you're preaching this, if you're not unwilling to really think really hard about this, then you're just putting up walls for people. You're just closing the doors and locking the doors and saying, well, if you're unwilling to do exactly as I say and think exactly as I say and believe exactly as I think you should believe, then you're not allowed in. Then you're not, and you're closing it not just for a few people, you're closing it for like 99% of the people, because people are going to get more educated. It's going to be more, you know, everybody learns this in school. So, and this is one of the roadblocks that I encountered with people, where they thought that science and the Bible were incompatible, which they are not. So, yeah, and there are probably a lot more things, and I think it's really about what do you want to achieve. Do you want to hold on to religious ideas, or do you actually want to reach people and change their life for better? You know, or you want to introduce them to God, to a God, or to your religious thoughts, and hold them to it. And like I said, I think that eventually the churches that are not being religious but acting in faith, those are the churches that will grow, and the ones that keep holding on to like religious ideas, those are the ones that will shrink. So it's up to you if you want to like build your community and actually reach people, or if you just want to say, well, I have all these strict rules and this is the only way I think that this is the way to believe, you know. And I'm not to say that there's anything wrong with that, except for what the impact is on your environment, on other people, and what you're doing to you're holding the door closed, you know, and that's what you're doing. So I hope this was interesting, and that you think about this, and understand it, and hopefully have use of it, and anyway, I'll be making more videos. If you want, you can subscribe and do whatever, and comment if you want to ask me questions. So I hope you enjoyed this, and have a super great day, and lots of love. Bye bye.